There are many sides to David Kraft. There's the father, there's the worker in sports media, there's the guy who before this interview was pounding water, getting ready for this conversation. He joins me on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley. David has been with ESPN, producer, creative director. There's not really anything he cannot do in this business. And we're going to talk about his life journey, career journey here. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, also a broadcaster with Olympic Sports. First of all, David, I appreciate you doing this, man. You dressed up for the occasion. You look good. You're ready to go.
Thanks. Bryan, it's obviously a thrill to do this with you. I've watched several of the interviews you've done with many people I know, and you do a great job at it. And, being the producer, I had to make sure I had the nice white press shirt for the occasion.
Well, this is a twist of fate here because you're the one who is doing the interviewing. So I look forward to a grade, alpha A, B, C, D, or F afterwards. I expect that in a critique written like a report. But I did want to start here. When you look earlier in your career, and this is something that people can understand, is that when we go overseas, we travel, we gain a greater understanding of life. It changes our perspective. When I look at the early part of your career, you went overseas. How did that change not only your outlook on life, but your outlook on your career and where it was going?
Big question. We'll work on the condensed version here. I was lucky enough before I joined ESPN to live and work in Southeast Asia. You could say I got two for the price of one. The company that hired me was based in Hong Kong. And about a year into my journey of living and working in Hong Kong, they relocated to Singapore. So I was fortunate enough to be located in two dynamic cities, very different at the time. And, we can have all kinds of analogies there, but mostly they not only gave me a huge window into, life in Hong Kong and life in Singapore, but they were really springboards for me to travel throughout the region for work and for fun. I hate to say this, but growing up in the US, a lot of people's understanding and even basic geography, basic geographic understanding of living in Asia or being in Asia is limited. And like, where are you? Where is Indonesia? How far is, where's Mongolia? Where does the Middle East, which primarily sits in, the continent of Asia, fit into all this. So it was a world, if you will, and many cultures that I came in with a limited understanding of, but was very eager to soak up and, get as many stamps on the proverbial passport as possible and visit places, some, with extreme poverty and other places that, tended to be more on the opulent side, like basically being in Hong Kong and Singapore. A lot of my experiences there was surrounded by that.
I want to go back to something that to a lot of people, when they hear this from you, is going to be mind blowing. And that is the faith you had in yourself. You were offered an opportunity at ESPN. Now you would eventually go to ESPN, but initially you decided to not go with them. What kind of faith did that take within you to say, I'll get there, but not just yet?
Yeah, I mean, maybe faith, naivete, all rolled into one would be, the answer. The way the story went down, and it's one that will stick with me forever, is that ESPN had offered me a position at the time, working for ESPN Classic, producing, writing, creating sports documentaries, which was sort of like the cherry on top roll. I get this great gig, and then my mind is, I'm going to move up to Connecticut and work at ESPN. And then along comes like a last minute phone call that actually was originally due to a connection through Craig Lazarus at ESPN, who I've known for many, many years. He put me in touch with a guy who he knew was in Asia, who asked me if I wanted to be a feature producer in Asia. At first, when I heard feature producer in Asia producing weekly sports stories, my thought is this some sort of mirage for, selling pharmaceuticals door to door? Because I can't believe it to be true. It was true. They needed English-speaking producers who could go overseas and know how to find, research, direct a story, and then, shape it all together with an English voiceover talent. I went back to ESPN and I said, in effect, I've got this other job offer. It's really exciting. I don't know what to do because I've always wanted to work for ESPN. And the person who was hiring me at the time, or who was my main point of contact there, was a guy loved by all, Vince Doria, who ran the ESPN newsroom. He had run ESPN Classic as well and had a very senior position at the time. And I said to him, Vince, this isn't me trying to negotiate and get a few more dollars out of you, or a lot more dollars out of you. This is me just really not knowing how to, compare these apples and oranges. And Vince said to me over the phone, I'll remember it to this day, it sounds like you're at a point in life where, don't have kids, not married, you have some freedom. We're going to be around. We're not going anywhere. And if you have this great opportunity to go and live and work abroad, I think that's great. And I probably shouldn't be telling you to do this, but go for it. And I was like, what? And basically the guy was saying, don't worry about it. You're not, dissing ESPN. You found something really unique. And in many respects, what Vince didn't say, but I think he was getting at, is that when I eventually got to ESPN, I was better for it because I had this opportunity to not only, as we discussed earlier, take it all in and, travel a huge part of the world, but essentially I was better at my craft than if I had those 2+ years, at ESPN. I just had a more diverse perspective and learned a lot of skills I wouldn't have otherwise got.
And at the heart of what you're about, it is storytelling. And
Right.
as you said, you were better off in going overseas and then coming back. In you describing your time overseas internationally, there were moments where it was outside your comfort zone. Like, this is a completely different environment you're in, and you had to adapt. And obviously, a lot of learning went into this. How do you think experiencing out of your comfort zone moments can make you a better storyteller, so that when you got to ESPN, you had more of a versatile idea of what you could do?
It's a great question. I'll point to two really short examples of things that I encountered overseas that, wouldn't happen here, if you will. When I got to Japan to do a story on a great baseball player in Japan at the time who ultimately came to the Yankees, Hideki Matsui, I was given all these assurances and all this to sort of organized itinerary of how my shoot days would be with him and his team at the time, the Yomiuri Giants. When I got there to Tokyo, and yes, this can happen here, but I realized I was dealing with the low man on the totem pole, if you will, in the Yomiuri Giants organization. And I was dealing with an infrastructure in Japan that is not, shall we say, always warm and welcoming to the outsider, that being the Japanese baseball, sort of structure, if you will. Nothing they said, nothing that this gentleman had told me turned out to be true, including doing an interview with Matsui himself, his coach, or anything. And for basically 2 days, I had to do a combination of, hustling, shucking, jiving, anything, and shall we say, maybe breaking or stretching a few of the Japanese very stringent rules on what media could do. When I say stringent, blowing away anything that, you could imagine here. It was just a no, no, no. And me producing, documentation, if you will, didn't do the trick. The interview got done, all the interviews got done. But the irony was that, and I was actually very proud of the story. I just felt like at the time, that probably wouldn't exist if you were given all kinds of assurances, to do something with a professional league here. There'd probably be some meeting of the minds. But there it was almost as if I had just shown up uninvited. I got to go to Vietnam, and in doing stories there as a media member, you need to have a minder, someone from the government who's there with you who you need to pay in cash, essentially before you do the shoot. It doesn't, if it doesn't sound totally on board, it actually is, but it didn't feel like it trying to take out, I don't know, several $100s in Vietnamese dong from an ATM machine, and then paying, this person, this lovely woman who I was working with, in a way to, make it all copacetic so I could just go on and do the story. That's not a story you would encounter here, if you will, but probably something that would occur in many countries. I feel like, to get to your question, what these kinds of experiences taught me is that if I can, quote unquote, do it there, I can, do the job here. Or maybe some of your bigger challenges is, how much time are you going to get with someone? Are they going to answer the topics that you want to ask them about as a storyteller? Are you going to get access to certain video that you had hoped for? Is there a budget for that? So I felt like, the equivalent of going to Asia was, like when an athlete moves overseas and maybe plays in a lesser league, has to fight harder and scrap harder, and then comes back not only a little more seasoned, but all the more versatile for it.
It's like when you have a baseball bat and you put that extra weight around it, and it's harder to swing. But then when you get to the United States, you take that extra weight off and you swing the bat. It's so easy. Yeah. So it shaped you in that way. How hard is it, though, for you, David, to turn off that producing mindset just in everyday, ordinary life?
For better or for worse, it stays with me, and it even infiltrates personal life. You'd have to ask my family and friends, and they, you might get a few rolls of the eyes, but the producer is, one of my former bosses once said, had a great quote: the producer is the adult in the room. Has to make the trains run on time, has to make sure the trains run on time in an affordable manner, and that, the train ride is a quality ride, if you will. And even if you're not involved in every aspect of making it quality or making it run on time, if something doesn't come to fruition, you are often the first point of target. Why not? You said this was going to happen, you said that was going to happen. And so I think, knowing that you are sort of working with an expectation where, unlike baseball, you want to bat 100% or 1,000 if you're a producer. Anything that goes wrong, the first instinct is little of a detail as someone's makeup didn't occur on time. They don't look as good as they should on camera. The audio person who's handling the interview, didn't account for the fact that the hotel has construction going on, which of course they wouldn't know, but yet, you're responsible in the end. But really, in the end, the story gets told in a rich, authentic way, and ideally for under budget.
How rich and authentic do you think we're telling your story right now, if we're to throw that assessment back to you and how we're handling this conversation so far?
I guess this is the point where you're asking me to grade you. Since we still have a ways to go. No, I'm just kidding. I've watched several of your stories, and when you invited me to appear on this, the one thing that resonated with me, Bryan, was that you do something that sounds simple, but you do it very well, and it's not simple, and it's called listening. The best interviewing to me is not, getting through your list of 20 questions or even, bunch of topics. Often, in the storytelling aspect of producing, the best question you can ask, which I think you do really well, is, tell me more, or simple as why. And you hear on TV all the time in interviews, the interviewer wants to pontificate a lot and sort of tell the subject how much they know and make it clear to the audience that, they're well read. But sometimes I think a lot of the time it just comes down to being a good listener. And I do think you do very well at that. So I'm giving you a very high mark.
I appreciate that. And I would say that one of the things that I've been working on is being able to your point, listen, but also say what I want to say in a question and not have it be superfluous and go on and on and on. Like, really condense it. make it short to the point. That's something I'm really working on as well, because it's not about me. It's about you. So I'm going to stop talking about myself. David Kraft is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So when you go into setting up stories and commercials, and one of the really neat aspects of your career and what you've done is working on Sports Center commercials. In setting those up, what was your vantage point?
Yeah, the This is Sports Center campaign is, one of the most iconic in advertising. And ESPN from the jump, had always just hit the jackpot with those spots because they were irreverent. They were a peek behind the proverbial curtain. They gave you access to talent, to Bristol, Connecticut, the headquarters, and to the athletes humorous side. And they did it in a way which was minimalist. I mean, they do it in a way which is minimalist. There's not a lot of script. There's not a lot of action. I mean, it's a 30-second spot that's supposed to poke fun at ESPN and let the athletes sort of weave in and out of that narrative. In the time that I was, honored to produce a few of the This is Sports Center spots, with that kind of, goal and legacy in mind, there's tremendous attention. There's a tremendous amount of people who have a say in the process. And Wyden and Kennedy, who had partnered with ESPN on so many of them, had laid out such a phenomenal blueprint of execution that, my goal when being handed that responsibility, frankly, at first was, I need to continue this process. It sounds very simple, but sometimes, we talk about producer instinct. It's like, what is my instinct? What do I want to do? What do I think would be funny here? No, this is leaning on the people who've been there, done that, of which there are many involved in the project. And this was just simply really thinking and looking at the spots and saying, how can we be sure that we're not copying identically, but we just simply have the right cadence and approach to it. And the first one that I was able to do, or that we did, was with Aaron Judge. Timely, of course, to be mentioning him now, when he was, in his earliest of Yankee years. He showed up at Bristol, went in for a workout and a home run trot on the treadmill. And the incredible aspect of the spot, you talk about, like, taking your producer, attention to detail out of it, is there is no dialogue. There's just him running on a treadmill, and the term home run trot appears across the treadmill screen. He high fives another woman who's working out, and a couple of talent, including Scott Van Pelt and Al Duncan, who are alongside him, and the mascot, because you got to have the mascot in there. And he walks out, and it's just kind of like, what just happened? And, you imagine people sitting at home, every commercial, if you will, or promo, you're hearing voiceover, you're hearing dialogue. So you get to that moment where it's like silence, or in this case, not even music. You're just simply hearing, the sound of, the interior of a gym. And that immediately put me in the, in the driver's seat of saying, we just got to execute on something that feels so simple, but we want to take precious care to make sure that, it looks and feels authentic and just stays true to what it is. So hope that answers you.
Oh, it does. It's interesting because it's so counterintuitive. You think that when you're doing a commercial, you want to say all these things and get all this in, but the human mind sort of checks out mentally. And when you don't have constant talking and stuff like that, it's almost like it grabs your attention even more in what you were able to master. Now, you mentioned that while your instincts played a part in this, if I were to throw your full instincts into, what would be a commercial of you, what that would look like? Let's say it's 30 seconds. What elements would you include that would be worthy of showing, that are worthy of, say, like an Aaron Judge home run trot?
I don't know. It depends on what side of me, but I'd like to think that, it's all pretty much folds into the same.
You get a little bit of your father, the showing the father of you, showing you going out internationally, showing some of the big projects. I mean, There's so many ways that you could answer
Yeah.
this, but if you look at some of your biggest feats
Right.
in the business, I mean, just starting there, how far would you span
Yeah.
that and what you've done?
Well, I'm glad you put it like that, because in that context, after several years at ESPN of, the documentary long form feature, true storytelling, that's a staple of ESPN's like editorial infrastructure. I did move into the branded world. This is not, now we're not talking about This Is Sports Center, which is a promotion of ESPN, but we're talking about working with clients who are advertising on ESPN, and telling their sports stories, that might have something to do with ESPN, but in the end, we're just sports centric and true to form of something or other. And what I loved about that was convincing a brand in the end, who is, bottom line goal is to sell something, to align their statement or mission or whatever, or marketing brief, if you will, with something that's happening, in the real world. And a few of the spots that, I was able to do that were very exciting and dynamic. One of them took me overseas again, was going with athletes and where they're driving a car, a Jaguar, a beautiful, expensive Jaguar. But the idea was Jaguar wanted to, be more approachable to the American market. And they figured if you put American athletes in a Jaguar that's priced lower than what you and I perceive a Jaguar to be, it'll resonate more. And what we had the athletes talking about at the time was their lives, their own stories. Sounds very simple, right? Because it's just like you and me talking here, athlete in the driver's seat talking to, a talent of some kind in the passenger seat. But to pull that off in London with a former New York Giant, Victor Cruz, or in Miami with Bryce Harper, those are the first two that come to mind, were incredibly challenging, because now you're talking about, the vehicle, making sure the right vehicle gets there, the vehicle shot in the right way. And that was a whole new world to me. But, relying on the same kind of principles, I feel like to pull off, multiple spots, which each campaign was, for a product like that with an athlete of that caliber and kind of a very metropolitan, area, really to me was something that I would probably put on my own commercial, because it brought in every aspect of both the storytelling and the producer attention to every single one of several hundred details, it seemed. So
From you working on commercials involving Jaguars to us taking a cruise around your career, I want to leave you with this last question. David Kraft is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. To what you're working on now, and to go to the metaphor of a car, there's really no gear that you're not able to handle the terrain of, if you will, with what you do. It doesn't seem like there's nothing that you're unable to do at this stage in your career.
I love the car reference. Maybe you should work for Jaguar. This announcing thing doesn't work out, or maybe you can do them both, because that's really how it works. But that's nice of you to say, Bryan. I've been fortunate in my post ESPN career to be able to, as you said, do really a wide variety of different productions. I've started a production company, a full service company, and my responsibilities, I like to say, are threefold: producer, editor, director. And if I need to, roll camera on something, I will do that too. But namely, I've been able to do everything from working on sports betting promos, to writing country music shows, to doing a variety of work with investment banks to try to help get out the message of some of the things they do that people don't, typically envision or see or think about. And that breadth of work is really, tapped into, I think, all of my instincts in working abroad, living abroad, and being, a part of ESPN for many, many years, both in Bristol and New York City. And really just having over and over the repetitive notion of writing and producing and laying out a story in the end, and trying to, pull that execution off as well as possible. So those are some of the things that I'm doing now and how they relate back to the past.
For you loving to write, for you writing the stories of others, I think you, as we have learned in this conversation, have a pretty good story that's worthy of being written as well. David Kraft, I'm Bryan Fenley. Thank you so much, man, for doing this. This was a whole lot of fun.
Thank you, Brian. Like I said, I really enjoy watching these. I think you ask great questions, and better than that, listen really well. So wishing you the best of luck.